Today I want to make you aware of the constitutional amendments that are going to be going on in November, that are going to be on the ballot, that we'll have an opportunity to vote on during the November 6, 2018 general election. Let's talk about a few of them today. Here's the first one: voter identification, or voter ID. On the surface, this seems simple enough, right? After all, people should have some form of picture identification, and people should show that identification to vote. But there are a few problems with it. Here's the first problem. It solves a problem that doesn't exist, which is voter fraud. Let's just go common sense for a moment. We all know that in all elections, we have far less votes cast than we do registered voters. So it's a poor argument that people are trying to prevent people from voting more than once, when the reality is people aren't even voting once. The second problem with this is that the courts have already spoken that such a requirement is discriminatory, because there are certain groups of people that disproportionately don't have a photo ID. It's for this reason the court said, and I want to quote, "It discriminates with surgical precision." Here's the problem. It embeds discrimination into the Constitution. Once we embed discrimination, what's next? I mean, I do have a valid picture ID, but I don't want anyone in our state discriminated against because they don't. Here's the third problem. The details of the ID aren't worked out yet. So even if this is approved, I hope it's not, then the General Assembly could choose any form of ID they want, a passport, or they could even choose proof of property ownership. And so we got to be careful about the voter ID amendment. Secondly, the cap on state income tax rate from 10% to 7%. It's a lowering, obviously, by 3%. On the surface, you can say, what's wrong with this? The most tax I'll ever pay is 10%. But if we approve this amendment in November, it's going to limit policymakers' options for ensuring that the state has adequate revenue to balance the state budget. A recession hits, tax revenues are lower, and then the needs of public services are typically higher, and then this forces legislators and local governments to impose new taxes and fees, or to make cuts in state and local programs that support the work of not-for-profits and our most vulnerable citizens. The third amendment is judicial vacancy. Basically, this is a shift in power. It's a power grab. Remember, we have divisions of power in our state: the executive branch, that's the governor; the legislative branch, which is the House and the Senate; and the judicial branch, which are our courts. It is a founding principle of our country, our state, that in order to maintain liberty, these three powers must be separate and act independently. Separation of powers refers to the division of government responsibilities into distinct branches to limit any one branch from exercising the core functions of another branch. The intent is to prevent the concentration of power and to make sure we have checks and balances. This amendment does exactly the opposite. It steals the power of replacing court vacancy away from the governor and gives it to the legislative branch. It also, and this is even more dangerous, opens up the door to expand the number of judges on our state Supreme Court from 7 to 9. Before we end today, let's talk about the one amendment that didn't get discussed, and we're not going to get the vote on, which is the Public School Building Bond Act. You remember in May, nearly 20,000 educators marched to the General Assembly in Raleigh. They were rallying for the resources students needed. They were rallying for pay, respect, and there's a huge need out there. That's better school facilities, especially in our rural communities. Because our rural communities, we don't have the tax base to compete with the large urban and suburban districts. This is what has been said. Quote, "We have many school buildings that simply cannot support or even allow for modern teaching techniques or the application of much needed technology. They're cramped, in need of basic repairs to walls, roofs, floors. Sanitation and even infestation is a constant challenge. These conditions severely impact both the student and teachers," end quote. And despite rank and file support in both parties and in both chambers, the Public School Building Bond Act was left on the table. Everybody went home. So what's the takeaway from all this? The takeaway from all this is, you can see we have some amendments that are addressing problems like voter fraud that we don't have. We have other amendments that are not present, and they're ignoring the problems we do have, like school facilities. So what's the takeaway? The takeaway is, number one, you have to be registered to vote. Number two, you've got to become educated and informed about the issues that face you as a voter. And then number three, you have to actually vote. And so let's make sure you're registered. You can go on my website, www.ctejdg.com. You can go on the North Carolina Board of Elections, the Nash County Board of Elections. And I want to encourage you to follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. All those handles are at JD Gailliard. Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of the Voter Information Project. And we'll be back real soon with another town hall, and we're going to be able to engage all of you as voters so we can become informed about the things that matter most to us in the state. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll share this. Have a great day.